Many legendary cowboy films and actors, including Ben's son Johnson Jr., emerged during the heyday of Hollywood's westerns in the 1940s and 50s. A multi-talented individual. In addition to his roles as an actor, stuntman, rancher, and cowboy, Johnson had a colorful career in the entertainment industry. Like many others, Johnson had it tough and had to fight for what he wanted. Even though he became famous and became wealthy, there is one shocking thing the actor refused to do. We need to go back to Johnson's origin story to grasp the actor's motivations for doing this. Like any other young man, Ben's son Johnson Jr. was unknown in the West until he became famous. On June 13, 1918, near Foraker, Oklahoma, on the Osage Indian Reservation, Francis Benjamin Johnson Jr. came into this world. His father, Ben Johnson Sr., and mother, Susan Ollie Johnson. On the other hand, his dad was already a versatile cowboy when he was born. In truth, his father was famous in the town as a champion roper and rancher, and a plaque dedicated to him is unveiled every year. It was inevitable that Johnson Jr. would follow in his famous cowboy father's footsteps, given the family's long association with the West. The world knew that Johnson Jr. was no average cowboy, so he accomplished that and more. His legacy will endure far beyond his death, since he was an iconic figure. His acting and cowboy legacy is strong and ever-present. Going back to their biography, it's easy to see how Johnson Jr. was shaped by his father and environment. During his boyhood, he learned all about the cowboy life at Pawhuska, which was also his home. His father was the foreman of the Chapman Barnard Ranch, and he began cowboying there in 1929 when he was just 11 years old. With an area of 100,000 acres and an annual cattle run of 20,000 head, the Chapman Barnard Ranch was considered one of the biggest in the state back then. They had to hire a large number of local cowboys due to the size of the territory. So back then, our humble Johnson Jr. was one of around 10 to 40 cowboys that called this place home. Johnson attended the ranch and did his other chores, but he also started getting more involved in rodeoing at this time. It was Johnson Jr.'s destiny to do anything other than spend the remainder of his life tending the ranch. The opportunity presented itself when I crossed paths with multiple individuals employed by Howard Hughes. Hughes was currently filming The Outlaw, a 1940 film starring Jane Russell, when this happened. You can't have a Western without horses, can you? Even though he wasn't officially a crew member, Johnson Jr. managed to get in here. He personally transported the horses from their ranch to the Arizona area close to Flagstaff, where the filming took place. Ben Johnson, who delivered the herd on his own horse, had no idea that this seemingly insignificant deed would later attract Howard Hughes's attention. Little did Johnson know that his life was about to undergo a dramatic transformation, as the crew was assigned the responsibility of returning the horses to Hollywood as filming came to a close. Hughes immediately hired Johnson after being so pleased by his riding abilities. The famous actor himself couldn't have put it better. "I was a wrangler by trade and had always been competent on horseback." Johnson swiftly enrolled in the Screen Actors Guild, where he honed his acting skills. For the most part, Johnson served as a stunt double and stuntman during his early years in the business. He filled in for a number of A-listers, including John Wayne, Joel McCrea, Randolph Scott, Jimmy Stewart, Gary Cooper, and more. Considering the subject matter, it's hard to separate the icon from the Western genre when discussing cowboys. Johnson, it's safe to say, became famous and eventually became one of those Hollywood A-listers. Johnson stayed modest and low-key throughout his career, even after taking acting classes and earning accolades for multiple performances. This was likely due to the fact that he recognized his acting chops were secondary to his talents as a rancher and cowboy. Among my colleagues, I've been one of the lucky few. Playing Ben Johnson has allowed me to earn a livelihood. Even if every other actor in town is a cut above me, nobody can hold a candle to me when it comes to portraying Ben Johnson. Thankfully, the performer is self-aware enough to know how to be himself. Johnson was content to play supporting roles for the country music fans of the moment, who had no idea his big break was on the horizon. Thankfully, film director John Ford took notice of him when he refused to settle for mediocrity in any role he was cast in. Given that destiny was involved, the manner in which it transpired is very remarkable. On the set of Fort Apache, which was released in 1948, Johnson doubled for Henry Fonda. Three guys in a wagon were in the midst of a shoot when all of a sudden the horses bolted. While everything was happening, 30-year-old Johnson watched from off-camera, waiting on his saddle. The promising young actor wasted little time getting after the fugitive wagon. Fortunately, his cowboy talents came in handy because he heroically rescued the three men in the wagon, just like a superhero from the West. John Ford was so moved by the entire experience that he pledged to pay Johnson back for what he had done that day. John Ford surprised him with a 7-year contract, proving that good deeds do pay off. This exceeded Johnson's expectations. Actually, all he wanted was to double down on stunt work and take on additional projects, but the director had bigger plans for him. Reading the paperwork revealed a $5,000 salary just when he believed the director's offer couldn't get much better. Therefore, Johnson acted similarly to how any of us would have in that situation. He set down his book, reached for a pen, and signed the document. His lowly $30 monthly wage from the ranch pales in comparison to the $300 offer he received for horse delivery back then. Johnson thought that $5,000 per week was a great deal, and we have to admit that he was right. It was a significant boost, especially considering that it was 1949. Now that he has a contract, Ford is no longer limited to acting as stuntman or scene doubles. He started out in supporting roles and worked his way up. Wagon Master 1953, Godfathers 1948, and She Wore a Yellow Ribbon 1949 are among his earliest works. Rio Grande, John Ford's 1949 Western romance, starring John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, had Ben Johnson in a supporting part. However, Johnson's Rio Grande wasn't any ordinary film. Two of the most formative events in his career took place there. The first was an exhilarating stunt in which they, along with Claude Jarman Jr. and Harry Carey Jr., executed the spectacular Roman riding scene. Because of this achievement, Johnson became famous in the business and will always be associated with Western films. His genuine talent, as we'll see in a bit, went beyond stunt work, although he did a fantastic job showcasing his cowboy abilities. Anybody who likes Westerns knows about the achievement because of how remarkable it was. Another further evidence that Ben Johnson has established himself as a leading figure in the field. His greatest qualities as a cowboy were immortalized in that scene, but he had other vocations that he pursued in life. An opportunity we'll talk about in a little, but he didn't seize until 1953. Not only that, but Johnson and the director were secretly developing antagonism, which was another major development in his life at the time. You know, Johnson is actually a really kind soul at heart, even though he usually plays characters who are fearsome and tough. In real life, he was famously cool under pressure and rarely lost his cool yet. He had strong limits, which led to his feud with John Ford. Rumor had it that Johnson Jr. confronted the director, who had a reputation for threatening the performers on production. Go to hell was Johnson's response to Ford's attempts to frighten him. They were able to finish filming at that point, and Johnson thought the director had swept everything under the rug, but he later learned that Ford had taken exception to it. So Ford cut ties with him for over a decade. At the time, it didn't really matter, but they eventually made up and collaborated on other Western projects. As Ford was ignoring him, Johnson found himself collaborating with Samuel "Bloody Sam" Peckinpah, a different director. The 1969 Western epic was directed by him. As for The Wild Bunch, it made the American Film Institute's Top 100 list and came in at number 80. Many were astonished when this huge revisionist Western came out because of the brutal violence and the clumsy way it showed men fighting for survival. The film's graphic violence earned him the nickname Bloody Sam because audiences weren't prepared for it. Even so, it made an impression on the Western genre, and Ben Johnson was grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with someone of his caliber. Peckinpah greatly admired Johnson for being genuine and humble, and the two of them actually worked together on 4 films. It wasn't just the acting bug that Ben Johnson had to deal with. A beat that was familiar from when he was younger couldn't be disregarded. Resigning from his role in Hollywood, he dove fully into the rodeo circuit in 1953. Please understand that this was not an extreme change. Even before this, on days off from filming, Johnson would fit rodeoing into his schedule. But now he needed to go back to his origins in a big way. It was quite a comeback, affiliating with the Association of Rodeo Cowboys. The next year, Johnson continued his arena dominance by winning the team roping world championship. An outstanding 12.5 seconds and 60-foot score were tied by Johnson in the competition when he roped. Johnson knew full well that he needed to take a break from acting in order to fund this, but he never would have thought it would be doable. "I decided to see just what I could do when I got into a situation where I could afford to travel," the actor added. "That was the year I won the world championship when everyone else was having a rough go of it. I won the title and still didn't have $3. A beat-up old automobile and an irate wife were all I owned." Knowing how tough the industry is, particularly for a nobody like himself, Johnson was cognizant of his status and never took it for granted, even if he was filthy rich. "Everyone is hilarious. He said that the industry is tough, but that people will promise you a lot if you look at them directly. However, after they disappear around the bend, they will no longer remember you. It's a blessing that I've never had to do nothing but sit around and wait for the phone to ring." Having a ranch or fishing spot has always been in my life. Ben Johnson had a large network of connections in the business, but he was very protective of his loved ones, especially his wife, and kept his inner group small. Johnson wed Carol Elaine Jones, the daughter of Clarence Fat Jones, a famous Hollywood horse wrangler when we talk about wives. In 1941, they exchanged wedding vows. She was 73 years old when she passed away on March 27th, ending their childless marriage. They stayed together till her departure. While details regarding Ben Johnson's social circle are scant, we do know that he became close friends with John Wayne, better known as the Duke, another Western legend. Because of how well gotten along they were, Johnson even brought the famous actor to his hometown of Pochuska, and the two of them maintained a ranch in Arizona. Johnson claims that he became friends with Wayne because of how pleasant and easygoing Wayne was to work with. To the point where I'd say it's more like a holiday than work. When word got out that Johnson's sister, Mary Ann Johnson Miller, had died suddenly from a brain aneurysm, John Wayne was the one who hired a private plane for Johnson. Despite being bereft of joy, she was just 48 years old. Johnson rushed to Oklahoma to attend her burial while filming Chisholm was still underway. Along with other A-listers, the actor appeared in more than 300 films. Shane, War Drums, One-Eyed Jacks, Major Dundee, The Swarm, Bite the Bullet, Break Heart Pass, A Rare Breed, Will Penny, The Wild Bunch, and The Undefeated are among his most famous films. Ben Johnson was a famous actor up until 1971, despite his many film roles. He won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in 1971 for his portrayal of Sam the Lion in Peter Bogdanovich's film The Last Picture Show. Johnson was hesitant to take the part at first, but she eventually agreed because the film was based on Larry McMurtry's book of the same name. Because of the script's explicit sexual content, the actor felt uneasy playing the role. Bogdanovich enlisted John Ford's assistance in persuading Johnson to accept the post. Finally giving up, the actor agreed to alter the script to remove the offending language, but only on one condition. Bogdanovich was pleased to oblige, and his position paid dividends in the form of an award he later received. The British Academy Film Award, the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and the Golden Globe were among his many subsequent honors. "I was completely transformed by the Academy Award," the actor declared. "People start to take you seriously when you take home one of these Oscars. Studios provide you more employment at higher salaries even when you don't really learn anything new." On June 2, 1994, on Hollywood Boulevard, Ben Johnson was also presented with his very own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Johnson was adamant about not changing, and I don't mean that negatively. While it's true that some performers have become ostentatious after receiving accolades for their work, Ben Johnson has remained humble throughout. Indeed, he confided in Copley News Service's Nancy Anderson that he would remain unchanged despite receiving an award for his performance in the most recent film. He did not even ask for a pay increase. Johnson attributes it to his upbringing on a ranch, fluent in cattle, and appreciates working in the Western style. He preferred to remain in his comfort zone, where he was successful financially since he hated failing. Although some may have felt he could have accomplished more had he taken a chance, Ben Johnson was an unassuming guy who was happy where he was. Besides, living the cowboy dream was his life's work. He remained loyal to his persona and refused to budge even as Hollywood's Western scene started to change. His criticism was shared by others. A large number of his fellow cowboys felt the same way. Even though Johnson despised the changes, he maintained optimism. He told the Oklahoman that Westerns still have a chance for a revival if they fix their mistakes. When he thinks of the next generation of Hollywood talent, the first thing that comes to mind is the potential for problems, such as casting directors and actors unfamiliar with the West. Because they are imposing so much flesh on them, theatergoers are fleeing. According to Johnson, there was a swell of new faces during that time, and some of them were using profanity in front of their families. Frankly, I find that offensive. That is not how I was brought up, and it is how I intend to die. They would have a selling point if they could produce a solid Western starring competent actors and directed by the man himself. People will go crazy about it because it's perfect for families. Ben Johnson's devotion to his profession following the death of his wife was such that he would have gone on to produce additional Westerns if given the chance. Unfortunately, Johnson was only human and died at a young age. While visiting his 96-year-old mother in Mesa, Arizona on April 8, 1996, Johnson had a heart attack. Johnson had been in the flesh for 77 years when he passed away. Despite his celebrity, the actor's modest burial was chosen by many who mourned the loss of a pioneer cowboy in Hollywood. At Pawhuska City Cemetery, Johnson was laid to rest among his stepmother, father, and wife. Along with him on October 16, 2000, was his mother, who passed away a few years later at the age of 101. Those who knew Johnson, or perhaps were just fans, continue to pay their respects by placing small coins and pennies on top of the actor's tombstone. The actor was recalled for being exactly what he said he would be: honest, genuine, respectful of myself and everyone around me, and true to what he said in an interview with the Oklahoman. Living by the golden rule to the best of my ability is my religion. As a way to be remembered, I try to treat others the way I would like to be treated. These kids would avoid a lot of trouble if you could just teach them to respect themselves and others. Not only was Ben Johnson a cowboy and rodeo fanatic, but he also knew how to use his platform to good use. He hosted rodeos at the Lazy Eyrie in Guthrie, Oklahoma, and donated the money to two organizations he believed in: Children's Medical Research, Inc. and the Children's Hospital of Oklahoma. What this event has done for the two recipients throughout the years, raising millions of dollars, is more proof that Ben Johnson had a kind heart in addition to being a cowboy and gentleman. Even though he has passed away, the community chose to memorialize Ben and his father because of the profound influence they had on the area. In 1952, while Pawhuska's mayor Ben Johnson was in the hospital recovering from cancer surgery, the community instituted the annual Father's Day Ben Johnson Memorial Styroping Radio. In addition, in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, where the Johnson family still resides, you'll find the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum, where you can find out more about Ben and his father. The museum has a wide variety of items from both cultures, but the buffalo statue is the showstopper. The area has been famous as a picture op for tourists who want to pose atop the sculpture. Even though Ben Johnson and his dad aren't the only ones who may visit the museum, it also features artifacts from several ranches, cowboys, and well-known personalities from Osage County, Oklahoma. If you happen to be in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and are a fan of Western genres, you definitely shouldn't miss dropping by this museum. Ben Johnson Jr. embodies the very definition of a man who takes pleasure in his work. For numerous reasons, including his authenticity as a cowboy, the years between the 1940s and the 1960s are considered the golden period of Westerns. Johnson received numerous distinguished accolades in addition to the notoriety, wealth, and success that accompanied his numerous contributions to the industry. Ben Johnson is still the only actor to have won a World Rodeo Cowboy Championship. A tribute to the amazing legacy he left behind, many people still know who Ben Johnson Jr. was, especially Western movie aficionados, even though decades have gone. We hope you enjoyed today's video biography of Western legend Ben Johnson. Please subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed it. This will ensure that you receive all of our future updates. Keep shining until then.